Welcome to Life Astrologer, and I'm Anna Isabel. So, I am an astrologer and an analytical hypnotherapist. And with me today, I have astrologer Alex Trenoweth. Alex, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I've been having a look at your chart, and the thing that really stood out for me was your North Node being in the 12th house opposite Neptune. What do you feel about that North Node and its condition, shall we say?
Well, I don't know if you know this from my from watching me on Facebook, but my mother's full-blooded Ojibwe, Native American, and not my parents, but all my ancestors had problems with alcohol, and so I think that's how it manifests in my life. And I've had to accept that I had to be careful. I have to have little rules for myself, and I have to manage that very, very carefully. And so I think that's how it works. But I try to channel that kind of energy into imaginative work, writing poetry, being a musician. Try to use it for more positive purposes.
Yes, because I was looking at that, and of course the 12th house is the house that I first looked to for ancestry, about ancestry, and so that's why I was thinking, gosh, and it's opposite Neptune as well. How do you feel the Taurus fits in there? I mean, it blends nicely with the music as well, but it's a North Node in Taurus, so I was just wondering how you feel that blends in.
Well, as you know, the 12th house are the things we're not so aware of. They're more in our subconscious. So I've got to say, I'm not really too, aware of my 12th house, in that sort of way. But I do, get involved in I like to cook, for example. That's a Taurian thing, and I certainly like to eat. I think that's pretty much the only way that I'm aware of it. By the sidereal system, I'm a Taurus rising. By the Western system, Gemini rising. So I guess when I look at my chart in the sidereal system, I guess I'm a bit more conscious of the Taurus. I once was at a Vedic meeting, and it was taking place at an Indian restaurant. And I walked in with a big plate of food saying that I couldn't possibly be a Taurus rising. But I like my Gemini rising because it fits too, because, I have a very neatly compartmentalized life. I find I'm two of everything. I'm mixed race. I'm a teacher and an astrologer. I find my life is often in halves.
Yeah, just so many thoughts there, but I guess, coming back to your North Node in Taurus in the 12th, I wonder whether you feel that you have almost like you could say an intuitive or a psychic link to nature.
Well, that's a little hard to say when we've been locked down for the past 12 months, but I think I now appreciate nature much more. I really enjoy my long walks along the canal, and I enjoy a slower pace of life now. When we first locked down, I didn't think I was going to be able to cope with not traveling and not be able to teach and all those sort of things. But I found a new appreciation for nature, and I'm taking a greater interest. I'm the worst gardener in the world. I kill absolutely everything. I don't even want to talk about my back garden at the moment, because we had this problem with our neighbors. Some sort of ivy burst through the fence and just basically took over our garden. So I've spent most of the spring trying to sort this out and replace the fence and rebuild my shed and things like that. But I think with the typical Taurian things, I don't think they manifest that much in my life. Other than the kind of joking things we said about food. For example, I'm not particularly good at business. I don't think I'm particularly stubborn or difficult. I'm quite flexible and easygoing. So, I think I find it quite hard to relate to that. But I remember I took a Hellenistic course with Dorian Greenbaum, And we were laughing because according to her system, she was saying that, that kind of meant I would be a teacher, but I'd be a poor one, which is pretty descriptive, because all teachers are poor.
I just, thinking about that again, I mean, obviously the North Node is something that we're meant to discover. That's an important process of discovery, that there are lessons that we learn through that North Node, or as we move towards that North Node coming from the south. And so perhaps this is something that is yet to unfold for you. But I think, because also, it is square your moon as well. So it's interesting because when I was looking at a couple of weeks back, I interviewed Israel Ajose, and his North Node is it conjunct Mars? It's conjunct something, and important. Was it? I can't remember now exactly, but there was a conjunction rather than what we're seeing here, which is a square and an opposition. And I asked him whether that was it. It was an exact trine, I think, to his sun. And I asked him whether he felt, that moving towards his life's purpose was smooth. And it seems to me that it would be smoother than here with you. And he didn't seem to have any difficulty accessing that North Node's traits, shall we say, whereas you're talking about a real struggle. So it's a real illustration of the difference when you've got those challenges of the opposition to Neptune and the square to the moon.
Well, my moon's in Leo, and I think that Mark Jones once said to me, he said, that Neptune square with the implicating the nodes would mean that I would attract drama wherever I go, and that's pretty much true. I mean, I've had quite a dramatic life, especially over the past couple of years. And a friend of mine was joking with me, and she was saying, all you have to do is stand in the middle of a room, and suddenly an astrology conference forms around you, which is has been my experience over these past couple years, because my friend MJ Patterson, all I was doing was asking her about what astrology is like in Canada, and suddenly she formed this conference around me. And then there's IVC. That happened the same sort of way. I just kind of wandered into India, and then boom, suddenly I'm in charge of this big, huge conference. So, I think I can relate with my moon, more about, that drama that's associated with my nodes.
Yes, and I would say that Scorpio South Node then, which would be conjunct your Neptune, I think has a part to play in drama as well, because there's nothing quiet about Scorpio. I always feel that the challenge for a North Node in Taurus is to find peace, is to find the quiet. It's to be able to just enjoy the simple pleasures of life without the complexity and the drama, emotional drama of Scorpio.
It's taken me some time. I mean, lockdown was at first very hard on me. And the first thing I missed, because being a teacher, and I've always eaten lunch in the canteen with my students. And so I've always had, 1,000 kids around me. And when I'm trying to eat my lunch and I'm having conversations, and I've always really enjoyed that part of teaching. And so to eat lunch on my own in the quiet was very, very unsettling at first. And I did all sorts of things to kind of make myself forget this was going on. Like I'd, be watching something and eating at the same time. But I made myself stop doing that. And I enjoy a peaceful meal now, to the extent that I wonder if I can ever get used to that kind of chaotic environment of schools again.
And that's a real 12th house experience as well, that sense of isolation, but then learning to savor it as well. Well, I think if you get the chance to just sit quietly outdoors, I think you'll find that you're going to be accessing both the Neptune and the 12th house energy quite readily, because lest we should forget, of course, Neptune sitting in your 6th house. And I've met many people with Neptune in the 6th house who only need to sit outdoors and they can feel the energy of the earth. You know, so that's why I was asking whether you have, whether you're aware of having almost like a telepathic link with nature. And if you haven't, then I think, hey, there's something fun to look forward to.
One thing I've noticed is I love to be near the water. And the canal, which is only a couple miles walk away from where I live, has been this real source of joy for me. There's a family of 8 cygnets that were born recently or hatched recently. And I've really enjoyed watching them grow and, you know, studying, you know, how they move and things like that. So there is an affinity with water for sure.
And there would be, given all the Cancer that you've got, you know, it's Sun, Jupiter, and Mars all in Cancer. So there would be that attraction to water. I had about 3 thoughts there and they're all gone now. But that was it. How connected are you to the Native American culture that is your ancestry?
Well, that's kind of a complicated question because my grandparents were sent to boarding school, residential schools, and they had the Ojibwe beaten out of them, basically. And that's always the way that I frame that. You know, they beat the Ojibwe out of my grandparents, and we never got the language. My mother didn't. She knows a few words, but you know, she didn't have the culture to pass on to us. So we had to reclaim this, and we did it through a project called Title IV, and they taught us how to do the weaving, the pottery, the beading. They taught us how to do all the stories. And so one of the things I did as a teacher was I would always be sure to pass on these Ojibwe stories to my students, because I just think, you know, they wouldn't hear them otherwise. And so that's one way that I think that I was able to pass it on. And to my own children too, of course, I heard all these stories. And so, you know, that's the connection. It's sort of a reclaimed
Good.
culture.
Because, you know, one of the things that I most love about the Native American traditions is the connection with nature that they have. And so because it's that North Node in the 12th and the Neptune in the 6th, I really feel that this is something important. It's a heritage that that's a part of you that you need to embrace in some way. So I'm pleased that that's happened. But I wonder whether perhaps there might be some scope for exploring a little bit of shamanistic traditions as well, just to access this axis of the 12th, 6th house. Is that something you ever thought about?
Oh yes, I think, you know, I do that, you know, quite a lot. And you know, I like my crystals, and you know, I have my rituals that I do and things like that. So yeah, I think I do.
Wonderful. It's lovely, because I think it's not often I've seen that, you know, that North Node opposite Neptune, and certainly encompassing that 12th. It's the first time I've seen it. So I was very curious, particularly that I also see a Chiron Saturn conjunction in Pisces. So this
In the 10th.
Yeah, so I see it there. So
My father's a chronic pain sufferer.
uh
He's had you know, so many operations on his back, and you know, he's in quite rough shape. But you know, I think that's how it manifested in my life, because my father has never been, you know, someone who could pick us up and could lift heavy weights and things like that. Whereas I don't know again how closely you follow me on social media, but I'm a weightlifter. You know, so I'm kind of doing the things my father could never do.
yeah, it's so there's a strong emphasis on Cancer. You've got the moon in Leo and Mercury in Leo. Working with youngsters is obviously a very important part of your life, because not only are you a teacher, but I think the last time I interviewed you was about your book, Growing Pains, which is about astrology and adolescence. What do you feel it in your chart gives you that impetus to be around youngsters?
Well, I think, you know, my the first quadrant on my chart is very emphasized, and I think that, you know, I just naturally find it exhilarating working with young people. And I think recently I've discovered that my skill is actually in training astrologers how to work with parents to support young people. And so I feel like that's been my calling. And it was kind of like right in front of me all these years. And I just chose to go and teach in a school, and, you know, not realizing that I was maybe selling myself a bit short by, you know, helping other astrologers to help parents, because as we know, that is the toughest job in the world.
It's so true. And I mean, I can remember from my days as a teacher that whenever I was concerned about a child, the first thing I do was pull in the parents.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know how things were at home. I wanted to know how we could work together. And I'm continuously astonished when I'm talking to parents whose children are having problems in school, and there hasn't been a conversation with the teacher. The teacher has written to them to outline that, you know, their child has done this, that, or the other, but there has been no actual attempt to communicate with the parents to say, can we work together on this? And I find that astounding. It's just so counterintuitive for me. And you're exactly the same.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding between parents and teachers. Like, for example, when the lockdown first started happening and parents had to teach their own children, well, the parents I was talking to seemed to be under the impression that teaching was all about talking at the child for an hour, not realizing that, you know, actually there's very little of that. Here is the lesson plan. There's the learning objective. You give them the task to do. You come back and you check it over with them, talk about how you can improve it, but you don't talk to them for an hour. And so I think a lot of parents made things very difficult for themselves because they didn't understand how to teach. You know, I've been teaching for 20 years, so I know how to do it. And there was a case here in East London where there was an attempted abduction recently. And so this made its way to social media on Facebook. And what the parents were saying was, can't the teachers do more? Can't they come out of their classrooms and actually monitor the situation? And I just thought, wow, you don't know what it's like to be a teacher. Because of course we can't leave our classrooms because we have things to do after school. You know, we can't just, you know, drop everything and go out to the street and monitor the streets. You know, that's not our realm. You know, it's not what we should be doing. It's not part of our profession. Safeguarding and child protection, of course, is inside a school, but to you know, even imply that a teacher should do more was a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah, no, I'm just happy when I find teachers who are willing to work with parents. That is brilliant, and of course that's one of the things that I love about what you do. So recently you have been involved in creating a learning program. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what I do with recently, for example, with the Sydney Astrology School, what I did was I created this course because astrologers cannot have unsupervised children, and by children I mean under 18s, on a Zoom call. Definitely not in the consulting offices because of child protection and safeguarding. Because you know, teachers know, because we have this training, that we never close the door with a child alone in our classrooms. You know, we always have to have, you know, things open, so in case an accusation is made. But astrologers, because they're not trained, don't realize this. So I met a very well-known astrologer who didn't have the experience of teaching, actually advocating, you know, this is how we teach, this is how we read children's charts. So ever since then, I mean, I didn't even think that was a thing. So ever since then, I've been, putting a lot of work into instructing astrologers. Okay, you can get away with this, but this is definitely a no-no. And so I created this course that sort of teaches astrologers how they can work with those children via the parents and not put their practices in jeopardy. So, it's been really, people tell me it's been, quite revealing and helps them transform their practices, and also does this thing where we're helping people that need the most help, and that's always going to be adolescents, because it's the most difficult time of life. But if you can't consult with them, how do you do it? Well, you do it through their parents, and you talk with the parents about their Saturn and about their sense of discipline, and you look at the child's Jupiter for their style of learning, and you talk to your partner about your individual Saturns and your limitations and your restrictions, and how you're going to work through this as a couple to raise this child who will have their own Saturn too.
So I'm just listening to you and I'm thinking very much about Cancer, the Cancer in your chart. And there it is, Jupiter in Cancer as well.
On this exalted degree.
Yeah. Tell us what you feel about your Cancer and how it ties in with your work.
Well, I reckon, 20 years in my teaching career, I've now taught about 50,000 British school children, because I work in lots of different schools. I work with an agency, or before lockdown I did. And so I'm just like, I always denied being a Cancerian because I'm on the cusp of Leo. And, I never, my mom was reading the horoscopes when we were young, when I was about a teenager, 11, 12, that kind of age. And she described Cancers as being home loving and shy. And I thought, well, astrology is a load of rubbish, isn't it? And it wasn't until I found out that my moon was in Leo that astrology made sense to me. But now that I'm a bit older and I'm kind of growing into my sun, I realized, I am actually not the best, with the worst Cancerian in the world. I probably might be the best, because I, have 50,000 children. And then I do, keep in touch with my students. And I do, when I was teaching, have a real affection and a sense of protection over them. And, so I might have graduated into being the best Cancerian in the world instead of the worst.
Well, it's one of those things. It's funny enough, just yesterday I was writing about Cancer, seeing as the sun was going into Cancer, and I addressed this very thing, how often I meet particularly women who don't like the Cancer, being portrayed as, the fluffy maternal archetype. And I was writing about why that doesn't actually work, and you then just echoed that. But I think for me, listening to you, what I hear and see as the Cancer energy is the emotional connection that you make with your students, with your children. Because I don't have to watch you with them. I just need to hear you. And the emotional connection is there, which for me, having also been a teacher, is always the hallmark of a good teacher. The teaching skills you can develop and you can improve as you go along. The way in which you conduct a classroom, the management of a classroom, that improves as you go along. But the ability to make a connection with a child at an emotional level and form a relationship and a bond, that is not there with every teacher. And that's what I recognize with you. And I think that that's very much the Cancer in you. And of course, Leo, I imagine that you are wont to making things a bit more exciting and dramatic for them, which will make things more fun.
The entertainer.
Absolutely.
The things I used to do to get their attention.
Yeah, I know. You have to get their attention, of course you do. And it's that connection. Where does Venus and Gemini fit in with it, do you think?
Um, I have a wide range of interests. I do love to write, and I just love to, talk to people. Um, I love social media, and I just really enjoy connecting with people. And I don't like to get into anything on a deep level. I don't like, intensive conversations. I just want to know, how's it going, that kind of stuff. And as I said, my life is neatly compartmentalized too. It always too is something, two careers, and so on.
Yes, I think that again, because you've got this, of course, Gemini ascendant, um, I was thinking about the youthfulness and the supple mind of
Mm.
Mercury, and how helpful that is if you're dealing with youngsters as well, because you have to be able to have a bit of banter,
Mhm.
uh, well, for that to work well. There's something else that caught my eye there for a second. Mercury's retrograde.
Unaspected,
Yeah.
angular. It's my ruling planet. You'll never meet a more mercurial person than me. You can
So
hear it in my voice. You can hear it, in just about everything I do. So I love Mercury retrograde season because everything seems to go really, really well.
you're the second retrograde Mercury person I've heard say that within a week. Because not having a retrograde Mercury, I've not been so fortunate the last few weeks. So how do you, so what was it like for you early on as a child with Mercury retrograde?
The only thing that I can relate to was that I was a reluctant reader, and I've always had very messy handwriting. And I remember, my first grade teacher used to keep me after school to practice my letters. And I just wasn't into it. I just, and reading, I used to memorize things and, read it back to the teacher, and they would think that I was reading, but I wasn't. I was just memorizing stuff. And the messy handwriting I got away with when I was teaching secondary school. Oh, I'm ambidextrous too. I can write on the board with my right hand and then write on the board with my left hand, and not turn my back on the students. That always used to impress them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But when I started teaching primary schools, I had to learn how to rewrite. And something I didn't realize is that all primary schools, or sorry, I should say each primary school, has its own handwriting policy. So, for example, in some schools, you never take your pen off the paper. And in other schools, there's certain letters that you drop the pen and flick. So there's different styles. So you have to know. So quite accidentally, I've become a bit of a graphologist, in that, I've had to, study how the letters are made and what they mean and stuff like that. And from that, find a bit of meaning in it. But that was accidental. So maybe that's an example of a Mercury retrograde learning experience. I didn't mean to do it, but there it is.
I was wondering whether you learned better by teaching yourself.
I think so. I think, most of the skills that I've learned, I've taught myself, but obviously, I was educated like everyone else is. So I'm just thinking, a good example would be astrology. I've taken a few astrology classes. I have the faculty from the, I have the diploma from the faculty, but there's a lot of stuff that I taught myself. And also a point of realization when I was studying with the faculty was that I was beyond all this, and that's when I went off and wrote my book and did my own research and things like that, because I realized, this is just slowing me up, while also realizing that I just had to get on with this course and finish it if I wanted to have the qualification, which I did. But that was a few years later.
Well, when I was studying for my hypnotherapy diploma, I remember one of my teachers saying, "Yep, I get why you might have an issue with doing it this way, but you have to learn how to do it this way in order to branch out and be an individual." And then when you've got that, when you understand that, you could do it whatever way you like, because you have to do it the way you like, because you've got to be an individual within it. And that always struck with me. that sometimes when we're learning, we don't like the structure that's set there in front of us. But that we have to understand the principles behind it, and then we can go off and improve on it and, do our own thing, do what works for us, which I'm sure you as a teacher appreciate.
Yeah, I think there's only a certain point that you can guide a student to, and then they have to take the responsibility and follow it through themselves. There's very little that I can do. In a more formal way, we do that with exams. We help them prepare for exams, but at the end of the day, when it's time for them to take their exams, I can't take it for them. They have to do it themselves.
Well, I think this is a nice point on which to end our conversation, as we've had a little tour of your chart. And thank you so much for agreeing to do that with me today.
Well, thank you. Lots of insights.